I was born in Charlevoix in 1931, and I've been a person on the street ever since I was 11 years old. When I became 11 years old, I was a helper to as a door-to-door milkman, and I was every day I knew what was going on in the whole town, and it's been really quite an exciting town. One of the earlier things I remember was at the corner of Garfield and Sherman Street. The Native Americans, there were 2 or 3 of them. I remember Mr. Shenaniquit had a yoke that he had 2 pails hanging on, and he got water out of a spigot on the corner. There was no water in the ground up in that area there, and so they had to come out to the corner and carry their water. Another thing I remember real vividly was every day there was Hooker's Barn. Hooker's Barn was on the southeast corner of Antrim Street. It was built 1912, and they had horses that they rented to summer people. What would happen was every morning the local kids would go down and get on horseback, and they'd ride them up to the north side up on Division Street and tie them up to a line of posts that were there, and the local kids then would leave, and the resort kids would come, and they'd pay good money to ride these horses all out through the Mount McSabe area and all over the north side. They also kept big limousines that the resorters kept in their garage there, and they also sent a load of manure every morning up Antrim Street and out the Norwood Road to their farm that they had on the Barnard Road, and that was a daily event. In the winter time, they plowed the sidewalks with a horse and a plow. We lived at 319 Mason Street, and about 4:30 you'd hear the horse go cloppity-clop going by, pulling the plow.
So there were a lot of horses that were used in the early 30s as a means of transportation and work.
Yes, well, they used, that barn was occupied until about 1960. 1963, the Olson family out of Traverse City came and purchased the barn, and they completely remodeled it, and of course they bought the hotel on the corner, and they made a complex out of the thing, and so that was the end of that. We used to have a restaurant at 218 Bridge called the Sugar Bowl Cafe, and all the high school kids used to go down there. The man was a very nice gentleman, and times were tough. My dad ran Northern Creamery Company, later Max Bauer Dairy, which was located next to the 1967 library that is now obsolete, and I would go down there on Saturday morning and sat in the office while he went over to the Sugar Bowl and found out how many 5-gallon cans of ice cream they needed for that day. So my dad would take the ice cream over, and then the man that owned the place didn't have the money to pay for it, and he said, "Now John, you come back after lunch and I pay you." And so anyway, he had a couple of daughters, and he'd always say, Julia, he got the keys. She was a girl, but Julia, he got the keys.
He got the keys.
He got the keys. And, oh, there's so many things I
Tell
could...
about the toast.
Yeah, he'd holler, somebody would want plain toast, and he'd holler to back, 1 order of butter toast, no butter. No butter.
His name was George Gladys, and he was a good businessman.
He was a good
guy.
businessman, yes.
What was his name again?
George Gladys.
George Gladys, yes. He was a Greek, and he ran a very good place, but times were tough. And so anyway, I'm doing all the talking here. You want to do?
You can just switch it over here.
Oh, all right. I was born in Charlevoix in 1933 on March 4th. And my mother was a school teacher part-time. My dad ran the Icon Standard Service, which was down on the four corners. The courthouse was on one side, the Standard Service on this side, then across the street was Hooker's Barn, and then there was a DX gas station at that time, and next to the DX station there was a little grocery store. Now every neighborhood had a grocery store for their neighborhood within maybe 2 or 3 blocks. And Mr. Kibbe was the one that owned that one. And I can remember going in there. So different from today, of course. He picked up everything for you. He had a big long pole that he put way up on the top shelf to bring down the cornflakes and things like that were light. Then at the far end, it was very small. At the far end he had his meat counter. And then when he wrapped up anything, he had the paper that he rolled out and then the string, of course, around it. And if you wanted cookies, he'd go over and get them out of big bins. Now you do see that sometimes today, but that's the way they did it back then. And then they had the candy and canned foods and so on the shelves in the back. Anyway, he was a very nice man and really a friend. You know, I lived up on the hill just behind him on Hurlbut Street, and Mother'd send me down for whatever she needed. And just run in there and tell him, and he'd get it all ready, and became a friend, you know. And let's see, both of us went to Charlevoix Public Schools. And
In fact, this was our kindergarten room right here.
that's right. And we sat on those little benches that are over there. And the pond was right here in the middle.
Were there really fish in it?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Oh, fish and turtles, it was
Yeah,
lovely.
the sides were about that high.
Oh, and Dale wanted so bad to have it at the new school. Well, they tried, but nobody took care of it, so they took it out.
Yeah.
But the kids would come and before school, and they'd sit around that little pond and watch the fish and so on. And our first teacher was Miss Bush. She was a tiny little lady. And then my Aunt Dorothy McCrae was teacher later than that, and now my daughter Diane teaches. So kindergarten was such a fun time, and we had a beautiful little house that was in the corner. And the kids
right
would be
over
able to
there.
play in there if they got there first, usually. And every time for reading or anything we did, mostly we sat on that bench over there.
Okay.
And now let's see. Then of course we went to high school and graduated there. And
What were some of the fun things that you used to do in high school for fun, that the groups of kids did?
oh, well, let's see. We would have our little clubs, you know. That we had the Methodist Youth Fellowship, and we would we made an actual paper. About 6 of us. They had the Crimson Flash in Charlevoix then, so that we could write a school paper, and that was always fun. I saved all of them. I save everything.
We've got just volumes and volumes.
Oh my goodness! Oh yes, all in books. And then we did this Methodist Youth Fellowship paper, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And then of course we'd get together down here. I was 13 and he was 15 probably at the time, and we play stone roller in this block right over here from the school. That's where Dale lived. And
What's stone roller?
oh, you'd get one kid that would have to be it, and then he'd go around. We'd go hide in that whole block.
Use the whole city block.
That whole block.
Oh,
And we'd go hide. And when he yelled stone roller, we had to yell stone roller back.
Huh.
so that he could get a hint as to where we were. And when he finally caught us, then we had to go and help find the other ones
Help him
till we
find the other kids.
got every one of them caught.
So nobody rolled any stones to help
No,
you?
No,
no,
Okay.
no,
That's
it was just yelling stone roller, and I don't know why. It was just, we had a lot of fun with that. And let's see, in school, when we were little, of course, we had a lot of things to play with, the playground and the and in here. But
Did you have homecoming like we have now?
oh
for
yes,
kids?
Yes,
oh yes,
definitely,
Yep,
definitely.
we had-
Yep.
Yep, and trying to think what else. Of course, we had the ball games, and we always kept busy all the time.
Oh, yes. Yes, we always,
We had good teachers.
yep.
I guess all of them are gone now.
Yep.
When did you two meet?
Oh, I was 13 and he was 15, and we were down at my girlfriend's house, which was just across the street and down this way from where he
206
lived
Mason.
at 206, okay.
306.
And he and his brother came by, and so uncharacteristic of him, he was only 15, we were just kids. He said, let's catch those girls and kiss them. Well, it just scared us half to death. And we started running. Of course, they ran after us, and they never kissed us and never did anything. But we went back over and we talked and talked, and of course, this guy can ask every question in the book of anybody, and he used to just quiz me constantly because my grandpa was the sheriff, and he wanted to know all those stories of down at the jail and all that kind of thing. And he's always been that way all his life. He always quizzes everybody to find out what's going on.
That's a great story.
Yeah, we, actually what happened, we wanted to get married when she was 17 and I was 19, and our parents said we were too young. Well, I had saved up a couple $1,000. I worked on the door-to-door milk route before school. I've always been a person to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning. And at 40 cents an hour, I had saved a couple $1,000. And right down this alley, that's right across from this building, behind 310 Clinton Street, there was an old barn. And I went and made a deal with a lady that owned it to buy it for $100. So I bought the barn for $100, and we started tearing it down. And of course, all the kids came with their hammers and their crowbars and stuff and helped us pull all the nails out. And so we tore it clear down, and we piled all the lumber up. Well, it was always a tradition that the gas station that her dad used to run, one of her uncles ran it, and that was where Judy's restaurant is today. And all the old geezers would go down there every afternoon and talk. Well, there was a nice man by the name of Mr. Byers that had a dray service, and I asked him how much it would cost to get the old barn lumber drayed out to North Point. I had bought a lot. Mr. Earl Young had a special on lots. I was making $42 a week at the time, and he sold the lots for $35 for one, $60 for two. I had gone down on a Saturday night and bought a lot, and I got thinking about it all week long, so I went down the next Saturday night and I said, will you sell me the other one for $25? And he said, yeah. He said, you're a good boy, I've known you all my life. He said, I got to make another deed out. So he did. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, the man said, if you load my truck with all the lumber, well, he said, I'll charge you $5 to take it out. Well, now, he knew me. I was a hard-working kid, and he didn't want to charge me anymore. So anyway.
There again, he was my neighbor.
Yeah.
And of course, Earl Young was your neighbor right in that block.
Yeah. And I had
Everybody knew you.
watched Earl Young build these Earl Young houses around. My dad would always say, don't get in anybody's way, so I'd set off the side and I'd watch him make stuff, and everything that he made was all out of used junk. And of course, this was used junk. Well, anyway, we built the house, the two of us, and so the next spring we had the house finished at North Point, and so we got married. She was 18 and I was 20. Our parents said, well, I guess you're old enough. Well, to make a long story short, we sent the picture of the house into the Mechanics Illustrated magazine, and they used a half a page in their national magazine and had a picture of that house, and we got what was called the Golden Hammer Award.
Well, that's neat. Yeah. Did you use that lumber that you took
Yes,
out?
we used all that lumber.
We sure did.
And I went to the lumber company, which was right at the bridge, and I had to get some of the pieces sawed up. He said, don't like to use, saw used lumber, but $1 a nail. How is that? We never hit one single nail. We had it all cleaned out. He said, so he sawed it up for us for nothing.
I remember Tom LeBlanc was just a little feller about like this, and he just wanted to get right in there, and he pulled more nails. He really helped us.
Yep.
He lives in Petoskey now. And another thing, when we built our house, we didn't have any electric things at all to use. No saws, nothing. So here we are sawing every bit like this. We made our own doors, and had to use the jig to go like this to drill a hole.
Yeah.
And regular screwdrivers. Just
Yeah,
built the whole house.
We did it all the hard way.
Well, can you talk a little bit about your parents when they came to Charlevoix?
Okay. My mother was from East Jordan, and my dad lived here. And he came to Boyne City first with his parents, and then they moved here. And they
Do you
lived
know when that was?
I don't. Well, let me see. He was born in 1909.
Yeah.
So I would think it was between 1900 and then that he came, because he was a boy. So she lived in East Jordan. Her mother was a school teacher.
My grandfather, Chew, that's my mother's father, came here in 1879. He was born in 1870, and the railroad company had a special that you could go from northern Ohio to Petoskey for $5. They were trying to promote this area. So his father came up and looked around, and he decided that he was going to come to Charlevoix. So he went back home, and in the spring of 1879, they loaded the family in a covered wagon with 2 oxen. And it took them about 3 weeks to come from northern Ohio to Charlevoix. They got out here on the Barnard Road late at night. It's the house where Skip Young lives today. And they paid a nickel for firewood, a place to camp, milk for the baby, and feed for the oxen. So they camped overnight. The next morning they came down through town, and of course the channel was only about 2.5 feet deep. The channel hadn't been dredged out yet. And so they put Grandpa, because he was only 9, he had to get in a covered wagon. But his brother, who was older, was 14, he forded the river. He walked alongside they got out to Green Sky Hill. They met a Native American, and they asked where the Minear family was that had come up a couple years earlier. And they could hardly communicate to one another because the Native American couldn't speak English, not much of it. So anyway, that's where they settled. His dad became county school commissioner, and he was county school commissioner for Charlevoix County at the time of his death in 1904. So we have a long history. The other grandfather came in 1882 from the Netherlands, and they settled out here at Barnard. And
so one family was north and one south.
One was north and one was south. The one grandfather lived to be 92, and the grandfather that came by covered wagon lived to be 97.
Wow.
And we have a picture here. In 1960, we had 4 generations that walked the Mackinac Bridge. We challenged the world. Nobody would take us up. We had 4 generations. The 2 grandpas that were 90, and my youngest son, oldest son, who was 5, myself, my dad, and we walked the Mackinac Bridge. So we've done.
Do you have that picture? Can you show it?
Yes.
Show it to us, please? This would be a great time.
Perfect.
Tell about when Grandpa went down by the bridge and didn't know.
Yeah, Grandpa was brought up a Methodist, but Grandma, who we married, she lived right over here at 302 Clinton Street. He married her in 1900. Well, anyway, they had 6 children, and they had a Model T. And so they were Baptists. They come down the hill to go to church on a Sunday morning with a Model T, and it was a real frosty morning, and one of the girls hollered, "Daddy, the bridge is open." And he stopped the old Model T, and he didn't even have room enough to walk to get around the front to turn the crank.
Oh, geez.
They were that close to going overboard into the channel. So all the kids had to get out, and they had to push the Model T backwards. So Grandpa could have room enough to get out to crank the Model T so they could get down to the Baptist church. Okay, that
This
picture.
is the Grandpa right here when he was older.
You just show it over here.
All right, right on this side. Then next is Bo Boss, our son, and Dale, Dale's dad, and then his Grandpa Boss. Now at the time, they were 83, 55, 35, and 90. Wasn't he 90 at that time?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nobody's taken that challenge since that you know of?
No,
Not that we
no,
know of.
no, nobody has.
Well, those old fellows were very game to try anything. We always took Grandpa Chew with us. I mean, he was like my family, you know. And when we go for rides, we always go for rides. And he would go everywhere with us. And he just loved it.
So
Yeah.
are you going to do it again now and do it fourth generation again now?
Our kids still, most of them go for rides, but they don't go with us for rides.
But I mean, walking the bridge.
Oh, walking the bridge?
Yeah.
We haven't done it in quite a few years. We did when our
No.
kids were little, and we wheeled the baby and
Yeah.
did that. But
Yeah, traditionally, when I was a kid at home, we always went for rides most every night in a car. And we always would end up, I always wanted to go down and see the choo-choo train. We'd go down to the depot, and these trains would come in, and it would take Mr. Byers and Mr. Ross, they each